Hello, hello. Welcome to the Three Things with Dr. B. At the TheMuDojo, we believe that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And we are ultimately intimately connected to one another, sometimes in ways we cannot explain. And therefore, as we are having a conversation about the three things today, we don't know what we don't know. And particularly, we don't know about what impact we can make on someone else. And no, you don't need to be famous or make millions of dollars or be a New York best-selling author to make a difference for others. And that's why we are here today. My guest today is Whitney Demorest. Whitney is an emotional and energetic resilience coach. With over 25 years of experience in personal transformation and a master's in clinical psychology, she blends spiritual practices and principles with practical strategies to help her clients reconnect with their inner wisdom and resilience. As a highly sensitive empath, she uses intuitive guidance and energy work like tapping and emotion code to help clients release emotional blocks and limiting beliefs. Her journey into energy work began in 2009 after overcoming chronic illness. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Whitney advocates for daily practices such as meditation, yoga, and breath work to help clients regulate their nervous system. Originally from Hawaii, she now lives in California with her husband of 30 years and their two daughters. Welcome, Whitney.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. This is
It's such a
wonderful.
pleasure. We've been talking about this for a long time, and now
Yeah.
it's finally happening. So, as you know, the three things are one, serendipity, two, purpose, and three, humanity. So, let's just dive right into it. Serendipity. Whitney, why are you here today? What are the events in your life that have led you to this point and for us to even talk today on this podcast?
Oh, I love this question. It really got me thinking about serendipity and what that means to me and um, how our paths go in life. And if we're open and we say yes to certain things, we find ourselves with brand new opportunities and brand new doors that open. And so I was thinking, well, this particular moment, like right here sitting with you, what led me here? And I think the thing I keep coming back to, I mean, there's so many things I could talk about, but one of those trajectory points, right? So we have these growth points in life, was when I was about 2003, almost 2004. My husband and I, it's now 31 years. We just had another anniversary.
Wow!
So we were living in Hawaii, at the Big Island of Hawaii, and we had two young daughters, so like 3 and 5. And there was an opportunity to move to the mainland. So my husband's parents lived in the mainland. My whole family lived on the Big Island. And so it was one of those choice points, right? We lived in this beautiful place. I had family around. It was a real place of connection for me because I'm born there and from there. Um, and yet there were these opportunities for my husband, and we found out that my husband's dad had been diagnosed with cancer.
Mm.
So there were things, a lot of different elements, right? And talk about like how do we really make decisions, right, in life. But one of the things I did was I said, okay, well, I should go and be in this place. And, my husband had already checked it out. And this was Chico, California. So in the middle of the Central Valley. Um, and so I went there and I was just open and I thought, okay, and, my heart is in Hawaii right at this time. So I go and I'm just open to it. And I find this really wonderful community, a lot of different opportunities there. And I'm driving to the airport, and the whole time I'm just asking for guidance. What should I do? What should I do? And it's one of the first times I got really clear and quiet and still, and this voice said, "Oh, it's time to move."
Wow.
And it was so clear to me, and I wanted to argue with it and be like, "Nah, that can't be right."
Yeah,
you know?
it's that little quiet voice that is very insistent. It just
Yes.
doesn't stop until you really pay attention to it.
Yes, yeah. So I came back and I told my husband, I said, yeah, I think it's time. And it wasn't like that was an easy choice, which is so interesting, right? And we can talk more about that. But
Mm.
we ended up doing that and moved to Chico. And what's so amazing about that is, I spent the next 10 years there in that town raising our kids. And there was so many wonderful things about it, in terms of community and school and education and um, opportunities for work and growth. But in that time, I found myself getting more and more sick. So I would get these sinus infections and um, just almost every few months.
Mm.
And I didn't feel good. I felt worse and worse and worse. And it really got to a place where basically my almost like a chronic fatigue feeling. So it was very difficult to function. It took a lot. And so that at that point is when I went to doctors and they said, well, take allergy pills. What was happening, one thing in terms of the external circumstances is a lot of allergies and different kinds of air pollution, blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
But the important aspect of this is like what was happening on the inside of me, like what was my internal experience of the external, right? The circumstances going on. And I had all these doctors telling me to take pills and do shots, and I just wanted to find the source of the illness instead of just treating the symptom.
Right.
So I think early on in my life, I kind of had that notion of, there's got to be a reason for things. And so that actually just set me on this seeking. And I ended up finding this woman who did energy work, and she did a particular kind of allergy elimination using energy called
Mm.
NAET. And I found this woman and talk about serendipity, right? She just came randomly into my experience. A couple of people had mentioned her, just we find our way when we're really
Yes.
seeking and really clear. And so I went to see her and she began to help me. And so I began to feel better and better. And I was just, I think, just finding someone that really understood my same, like, let's find the source of this. But she introduced me to emotional freedom technique,
Mm.
to tapping. I'd never heard of it before. And she gave me a book and I started reading, and it was an immediate yes for me. Like, that is amazing. That sounds like an amazing tool. And I need to find out about this. So I started just learning about it, using it on myself. Then I went through two different programs, learning how to use it and certification for tapping. And so those two things really started to get me on this path of, wow, there's a way of healing that can really be a deeper way of healing. And it's back then, I mean, this was 2008, I think. So
Hmm.
back then, tapping was like weird. Nobody
Yes.
even talked about it,
Can you
right?
tell us what is the difference between NAET and EFT?
So NAET is it's same thing using the energetic meridian system and the whole sort of energy body. To what happens is they use muscle testing to speak directly to the body, to test to see, okay, what is this body needing right now and what is it feeling allergic to? What is it resisting and feeling like is a danger to the body? And NAT uses little vials. So they're these tiny little glass vials of different things. Let's say mold, grass,
Mm.
um, all kinds of things. And then you would hold them, and then she would test. Okay, where are we with this? Now, to treat this was almost kind of like, I don't know if you're familiar with homeopathy, but it was like bringing this into the system until the system could could take care of it. So she would basically do work with the governing meridian, this main meridian of the body,
Hmm.
and she would use the chiropractic impulse machine to stimulate those points on the body. So that's pretty much how it was
While
treated
holding the vial still.
while holding the vials.
Interesting.
And then there was a period of time where you would just sit with the vials.
And
And then,
yeah, and
yeah, go ahead.
so you said something interesting, which is talk to the body, right? It's like bypassing the consciousness and be able to just
Yes.
connect directly to the unconscious. And that's exactly what happens with EFT as well. So, and you said very well, in 2008, we didn't have that. It was a little bit like woo woo, right? Do we have, we certainly have a lot more clinical data now with EFT. How about NAET? Do we have clinical research done on NAET as well?
You know, I don't know. I don't know about that, but I would think now that we do. I would
Yeah,
assume that we do for sure because I
yeah.
know it's still used and used really successfully. Yeah,
So going back to serendipity, then, I mean, I guess if you hadn't gone into EFT and I hadn't gone into EFT, we wouldn't have met.
that's
No,
right.
or maybe we would have met in a different time
Right.
space continuum.
Yes.
And it interestingly, when you say, you know, these key decisions in life, I won't talk about the EFT piece for me. I will talk about one of the reasons we met is because I made a decision maybe more than 10 years ago to have my son go to a French American school. You would say, what? What's
Yeah.
the connection there? Well, the connection there is one of the parents that I met, a couple that I met with kids that were in the same class as my son. We connected really well and we had tons of conversations. And as I started launching this business a few months ago, I connected with her and she knew you. And so, you know, if I hadn't made that decision of a school, we would, same thing, we wouldn't be here
Yeah.
today.
Right. Right.
So I find that
Yeah.
very interesting. And you said it very well too. It's those key decisions where one day you say yes, you don't really know why. And
Yeah.
it's not always an easy choice.
Yes.
I thought that was very interesting what you said there. We don't
Yeah.
make
And
the
I
easy
really,
decisions.
yeah. And I think that it's such a valuable gift to know this, right? That those decisions that like when I was in it in Chico and things were really challenging, I thought, why was that? Why did that voice bring me here? This is so hard. Like this is but now looking back, I
Mm,
see, oh my gosh, it opened. I had to be a little bit challenged to reach deeper. Like,
that's
you know,
interesting.
sometimes an easy go doesn't have us face what we're really made of and really I believe why we came to the planet. So I feel like sometimes when we get a little bit off our path, something kind of goes, let's bring you back
Right.
because I do feel that, and it's funny, you talked about our mutual friend. I was thinking about that too, as you know, how we're connected in this moment. And as a child, I moved a lot.
Mm,
So a lot of change, and I think we might have that in common.
we do.
Um, and and that was hard. Again, a hard thing. Gave me a lot of tools to be resilient.
Absolutely.
But at one of those schools, elementary school, is where I met our friend. So
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
yeah,
You go a long way.
yeah,
And it's also
exactly.
connected to school for some reason. Fascinating.
Yes, yeah,
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about purpose. Uh, so now you've gone through this new adventure of taking care of yourself. You've got all these signals that something was not right, but you listened and you trusted your intuition, made some decisions, went on to your seeking mode, adventure, and now you found EFT, you certified, you went into training, which is an interesting thing because you could have stopped there thinking, okay, EFT has helped me, thank you very much. But
yeah,
you decided to go into a different direction. So that's
yeah.
purpose. So tell us
Yes,
a little bit about that.
yeah. And I think that links if I go back in time to earlier in my childhood, even just always an innate desire to help people. And in my family, big family, four siblings, I grew up with a dad who had chronic pain. So I think that the combination of being highly intuitive and highly sensitive, and which means that I would sense and know how people felt even before they expressed it, which I
Mm.
didn't really know then, right? But I just was like, I always knew something was a little off. Or so watching my dad over all this time have this chronic pain, there was a part of me that always was like, how can I help him? How can I heal him? So I think that was one of the seeds.
Mm.
And so that took me on my journey through really my education too. So um, going into psychology and, fostering this curiosity, like what makes people tick?
Mm.
And just always a curiosity about that. So I went into psychology, got a master's in psychology. So I was just always fostering this curiosity. And early on, when I was in high school, I was blessed to be a part of this camp for adolescents called Super Camp. It doesn't exist now,
Mm-hmm.
but back then, so we're talking, 1980s, it was like a 10-day place where the adolescents would come to a residence, to a college campus. They would learn life skills and learning skills with a combination of a ropes course in between. So they're learning about how to communicate, how to be in positive supportive relationships, how to get through self-judgment and criticism. Then they're learning how to speed read, how to take a test. So
You,
I
you mean
became,
what they're supposed to learn in school, but you
yeah,
have to have a summer camp for that.
exactly. So I was blessed early, like as a teenager, to be in this ethos of, oh, transformation, learning, growth. So this sort of
Nice.
expanded way of what's possible. So those things just led me into, okay, I want to be able to support people and help people to break through their limitations, to break through places where they're stuck. And so that's what I did. So in Chico is when, and I had always done that in different ways throughout my life prior to Chico.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in on ropes courses. Um, I worked in agencies, so there was always this commitment to that.
This
But
red
in
line, like a
Chico,
theme in your life.
yes,
Yes.
yeah. So in Chico is where I decided to open a practice. So, and do coaching, see people one on one, and then integrate tapping. And when I did that, see, I was already sort of coaching, and when I found tapping, I saw quantum changes,
Mm-hmm.
um, quantum positive changes in people that before it would take months and months and months and months. And so that just continued to lead me to where I am today. So I've
Mm-hmm.
been continually growing, working with people, and finding ways for people to discover the power of their own system and body, because I believe that all the healing we need is right here. We just need to know how to access it.
Yeah. Tap
And
into
we
it.
need to get rid of what's in the way of accessing it. And then once people really understand the power we have with our thinking, our energy, nervous system techniques, I just love it when people can really discover that for themselves and feel empowered to make the kind of changes that they want to make.
And you
So,
said something very important, which is the time it takes, and sometimes it's very fast, much
yeah,
faster than we think, and we are sort of educated to think that those mental issues or emotional issues or even physical issues need very hard work for a very long time to be solved. And we also have a belief in our society as a human species that a lot of it is kind of carved in stone and you can't change it. But
yeah,
now new science data actually tell us that that's not true, and there's actually a lot of things that can change fast in our nervous system and epigenetics, and we won't go there necessarily in detail today, but
Another
this
time.
is fascinating. So
Yes.
you talked about NAET and EFT. You also talk about emotion code. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So, about, I think 3 years ago, is when I first learned about emotion code. And now again, it's been around for 20 years.
Mm.
But it's kind of, I just feel like it's where we are, just the evolution of what we're open to, as a culture is just expanding, right? So
Right.
I think more things like this are coming into our awareness. But so I discovered it, and again, it was the same feeling I had with tapping, and it was an immediate, oh, this makes sense to me.
Mm.
I think this is powerful. So, again, did a training, started using it on myself. Of course, all my family knows me that they're going to be my guinea pigs. Um, so I started using it, and it came naturally to me. But the principle and essence of emotion code is really this theory that um, if we don't process emotions thoroughly through our body, and there's a lot of reasons why we don't, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trauma, conditioning, we could go on and on, but it remains in our system, so it gets um, congested. I try not to use the word stuck, but there's a place in our body where this is held, and so the natural harmony, the natural balance of our body just can't function well. And so that's when we feel challenge, or challenges created for us in
We
our
feel
system.
stuck. I mean,
Yeah,
we can feel stuck. Yeah.
we can feel stuck. So in a lot of different ways that shows
Mm-hmm.
up. So really, emotion code is a way to find and release trapped emotional energy from the system. And again, it's very, like you were talking about before, this conditioned belief that it has to be hard. Now, sometimes it is hard, but this particular technique, it's very simple, and it's very gentle. And really, what it would be if I'm working with you and you bring an issue to me, let's say it can be a limiting thought that you have over and over that you just can't seem to transcend.
Mm.
It could be a physical issue. It could just be a feeling that is difficult for you to deal with, anxiety, depression. So you bring that to me. I use muscle testing, the same as NAET, NAET, to tune into your biofield. So this field of energy that we have that can be measured now, it holds so much information, all of our information. And so basically, I'm tuning into that. I'm using muscle testing to see, are there trapped emotional energies contributing to this? And generally, the answer will be yes. And then there's basically a basic grid of emotions I use to find those trapped emotions. It could be grief, it could be anxiety, it could be nervousness, it could be anything, sadness. And then to release it, it's very similar. We're using the main governing meridian.
Mm-hmm.
We're using a magnet, which just intensifies the movement of energy. And we're holding strong intention to release this from your body. And that's how simple it is.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, and
Yeah,
it
and
can,
I attended one of your workshops with
that's right.
emotion code. So I encourage people to experience it by themselves because it's very
Hmm.
interesting. And again, the same way as EFT was very uh, non-science based for many many years. As researchers start to look into it and do MRIs and EEGs and explore how the brain waves are impacted by tapping, I'm sure we could demonstrate the same for Nate, the same for emotion code. We don't really understand all the mechanisms of action, but we see science catch up with the arbitrary approach that we've been taking before. So
Yes,
one
right.
one question I have, you talked about the energy field, and I think intuitively people know that they have an energy field, but we have demonstrated that that exists, and the energy field of the heart is very big, and the energy field of the brain is smaller but still there. And we have it around us. It's like what people call more commonly the bubble, right? You're in my
Hmm.
bubble. I can
Yeah.
feel you're impacting my space. That's the energy field in a way. But what's interesting is you work on Zoom, don't you?
Yes.
And so how does that work? If you're not in person, but you
People
are
love,
sensitive,
yes.
right? How does
Yeah.
that work?
I love this because this is another place where if people are willing to suspend their conditioned belief, right, that I can only make an impact or tune into your field by being physically next to you. Well, that they've actually proven that that's not true. So, or that there's other things that are also true, which is entanglement theory, which um, I'm not going to go into right now, but basically that with intention and energy, I can affect and impact your field from thousands of miles away
Yeah.
so that it doesn't, there is no time and space. And it's difficult when you're not used to these kinds of ideas and theories because we want to, I think everyone seeks security and I'm in a physical body and here I am. And when we start talking about things that take us away from those really known beliefs,
Hmm.
people tend to get a little resistant or
Right.
worried or whatever
It
comes
can be
up.
it can be scary. I think
Yeah.
intuitively a lot of it. I think we understand.
Yeah.
But it's far fetched in our society today to still look into this
Yeah.
seriously. And
Right.
I would actually take that as an opportunity to recommend a book from Dawson
Hmm.
Church
Yeah.
called Mind to Matter, where he
Yeah.
actually
Great
discusses
book.
all the science and all the data and all the analysis that has been done in that sense. So Mind to
Hmm.
Matter, Dawson Church.
That's a great book. Yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah.
So what else can you tell us of your practice today, and how you're living your purpose every day?
So, yeah, so I work with, like we said, people one on one, and then I also do classes and workshops.
Mm.
And I have found that one of my special areas that I really love and have a passion about is working with people who have that trait of high sensitivity. And this came up for me, obviously, like I said in the beginning, I knew early on that I was really intuitive and empathic. And, but I have two daughters, and one of them is also extremely empathic and intuitive. And so when she was in high school, I started to notice a lot of mood swings and just different kinds of challenges. And I started to really, again, ask for guidance around this and came to that, oh, I began hearing about books and this high sensitivity trait.
Mm.
And because I'd always heard about empaths, and the kind of qualities that they have. So, got deeper into that and realized, oh, okay, this is an actual trait. And that 20 to 30% of people in our population have this trait. And I started to really see the power in letting people know if they have this trait, what that means. And that because what happens if you're not really aware of it or educated about what this trait means and how to manage it, um, people can get very stuck in feeling that they're flawed
Mm.
or feeling that life is too much and I can't go for my dreams because I'll get overwhelmed or I'll get
Mm.
overstimulated or I'll feel too much. So I began to see all of these limiting beliefs that came from having this trait. And so I just love working with people that have this trait and to teach them different ways of managing it because there's so many innate gifts and one of them being deep empathy and deep feeling. And I feel like this world now more than ever needs that deep compassion and to raise the level of empathy in humanity.
And it's so important because apparently those are people that can help others tremendously. And so if they
Yes,
get stuck in the sort of side effects of that trait, then they don't live the purpose, right? They don't
exactly.
give themselves for benefits of others.
Yeah.
So tell me, I think you have a workshop coming up for this specific type
I
of person.
do, I do, I do. So yes, it'll be the end of October. I don't have a exact date yet, and it's going to be a 6 week class. We'll meet once a week on Zoom, and also I'll be doing one-on-one. Every participant will get a one-on-one session with me, either tapping or emotion code.
Mm.
And what I'm going to cover is really unlocking the sensitive strengths and really talking about how to manage that sensory sensitivity so that you don't get stuck in cycles of overwhelm. And I'll also be talking about boundaries and setting boundaries and self-care and what that looks like. And then I'll also be talking about how to really tune into and grow intuition
Mm.
because it can often be really difficult for people with high sensitivity to make decisions because they're very tuned into how's it going to impact everybody else, the overwhelm of all the different what ifs and outcomes. And
Mm.
so, again, how can we really use our innate? I believe everyone has intuition, but high sensitivity folks generally have this more expanded ability than they really realize. So we'll be deepening that
Mm. You
too
you said
as we
earlier
go.
not everyone knows that they have that trait. So as you're
Hmm.
talking about this workshop, and we're going to put your website up in a minute so that people can sign up into your website and get the updates so that they'll know exactly when the dates come up. How would they know? How would they know that workshop is for them?
Yes. So, basically, if you've ever felt, I'll just go general and then more specific, but if you've ever felt like just everything's too much, just that life feels too much, and like a lot of people feel like that, but to
Mm.
the point where it affects your physical well-being. So you get ill because you just feel like there's too much going on. If you're overstimulated, if you go into a room, a party, and the lights are too bright, and you're really impacted by the song on the radio, and the people are talking really loud to the point where you can't focus and talk
Mm.
to the person in front of you because there's so much stimulation happening. Um, deep, deep feelers, deep, deep thinkers. Like, something you have an interaction with someone, 5 days later, you're still kind of processing, wow, I wonder what
Mm.
they meant by that. Or, you're still carrying some of the worry that they had when they were in your space.
Mm.
So everyone
Interesting.
has a different experience of it, but those are some of the ways I experience it. But basically, um, Dr. Elaine Aron is really sort of the founder of this trait. She started to notice this in her therapy practice. She's written several books. Now there's hundreds of books, but there's four indicators really. There's depth of processing, which I spoke about, that when things really are come into your system and it's like continual processing about it, where you'll ask your friend, you saw the same movie, and your friend goes home and you talk to your friend about the movie and they go, what movie? And you're still thinking about it. So, and then overstimulation, which I talked about, emotional intensity. So
Mm.
just the really feeling things intensely, and then sensory sensitivity.
It's almost like being a sponge of energy around
Yes.
you. It's
Yes. Yeah.
fascinating. I may have some of these traits. I may have to talk to you about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's so fascinating because it's not only our species, like there's many, many, many animal species that
Mm.
they've discovered also have this trait. And there's a reason for it in our species. It's like these are the people who are highly aware, like their antenna goes up
Mm-hmm.
when there's a threat way before other people.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
there's a
and it's a
reason.
role to play in the herd.
It's a role to play in the herd. Well said.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Fascinating. So I would guess dogs have that trait.
Yes.
They're very
Yes.
empathic.
Hmm.
What other animals do you know about?
I
about that?
think there's cats, there's even some, there's even some fish, but
Huh.
there's many, many, many. In fact, I think there's only a handful of species that don't have it.
Hmm. Fascinating.
Yeah,
I'd love
yeah,
to have a vet at my podcast to explain us a little bit of the
yes,
studies around this.
yeah, yeah,
That's so cool. Excellent.
yeah,
So we have a third question, which is an important one. And I think we already started touching on it, but it's
yeah,
humanity.
yeah.
What would you, Whitney, want humanity to either think about next or do next? What are some actions you would love our listeners to take and consider today to make the world a better place together?
Mm, yeah.
It's a loaded
I
question, I know.
think it is. It is.
But
You
we have
know,
the power of changing the world. You know,
yeah,
any individual on the planet has that power, and we know in history we know some people that as individuals have changed the world, and we still talk about them in history. We all have
yeah,
that potential,
yeah,
maybe at a different level, but that's what
yes.
we're here for.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I think you said it in the beginning, and it's really for people to understand, for humanity to really understand at a whole new level that we are spiritual, energetic beings having a human experience. Exactly what you said. Because I think with that perspective, many things can shift and open. And I think it's an invitation for people to transcend the limiting beliefs of only living, giving a lot of importance to only mind. There's so much more beyond mind. And I think that just having that ability to zoom out in our perspective of our human story, because I believe that if people could understand that the narratives and stories we tell about our lives create our lives. So
What I call
if
the
we're
self talk, right? A
the
lot of
self
self
talk,
talk.
I actually heard someone say the other day, he calls it cell talk, CELL, that we're talking to the cells
Uh
of our
huh.
body. I love that because
Mm.
it takes it deeper because we really are impacting what's happening in our bodies and the
At the
cells
cellular level.
at the cellular level. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
So
think if
true.
people could zoom out and see their life from a higher perspective, that soul perspective, that spiritual place, then I think that more um, alignment in terms of why they're here, like their heartfelt purpose shows up for them.
I have a
And
quick story to share about this as
yes,
an
please.
example. One friend of mine one day said, as I was distressed by something, and I don't need to go into the details, but he just told me, okay, sit down a second and just imagine that we are 50 years from now. How, and you look back at this moment, this exact moment in your life, and how do you feel now? Right? It immediately gets you into a higher level of perspective in your life.
Yes,
And
yes,
looking back and thinking, oh yeah, this is just like this little thing in my a little detail in my life. Why would I grab onto that and just stick to it and just be miserable about it? So
yes.
that perspective I thought was an interesting, very easy thing to think about when you're
It
very
is.
distressed.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, that's a great way to say it for sure. Um, yeah, and one of my favorite quotes is Viktor Frankl, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in
Mm,
that space is the power to choose a response.
yes.
And in that response lies our greatest growth and freedom.
Mm,
So it's if we can raise our awareness about what's happening in this body, this system, find places to be still. And that's why I really advocate for people to have daily practices of coming home to themselves.
Mm.
You know, we can get there's so many things pulling us out of our space, like we were talking about before we went live, that out of our bodies. And how do you start your day? You know, for even people to think about, and how could you change that to have a different trajectory for your day? So, you
Yeah.
know, my morning is, if I don't meditate, if I don't do a little bit of yoga and some breath work, you know, my day turns out very different, and I'm at the
Mm.
mercy of um, an emotional response, reactivity, old thoughts or patterns. So I told my husband the other day, I was, you know, because there's obviously, we all get caught, right? We all get like reactive. We all
Mm-hmm.
get stuck in our old trauma, whatever it is. And there were a few days where in the morning I get up and I find, all of a sudden I find myself doing laundry or doing this, or I gotta water the plants, or, you know,
You go
this
into
ego,
task. Yeah. You,
yeah,
you,
go
you
into
default into
task,
task. Yeah.
right? Which, it's like, to me, that's sort of my ego trying to keep me distracted
Mm-hmm.
from what's really of purpose. And so I just caught myself and I just said to myself, it was so funny. I said, I'm the boss of you. Now sit down and it's time to be still. It's like that bigger part of me, right? The wiser part of me saying, you know, I'm the boss of you, ego. You know, here's what we're doing today. So that's why I
Taking,
really advocate for practices.
yeah, taking back some control from that
Yeah.
self-talk.
Yeah.
In some ways, I've I've told some people to imagine that that self-talk is a person, an entity,
Mhm.
and give it a
Yeah.
name. It's part of you, but you can give it a name. I call mine Mr. Stucco.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the best thing to do is to start creating that and enhancing that self-awareness so that when it happens, you slowly get into the habit of saying, "Hup, stop. I
Hmm.
recognize you. Thank you very much for
Yeah.
all of your help, but it's
Right.
right now not very helpful to me.
That's
So
right.
thank you, Mr. Stucco. Go away."
That's right.
And another tip I've given was also, which I got from the Brave Thinking Institute, was make an appointment. If you have fear or any Mr. Stucco happening, make an appointment with that entity and actually put it in calendar in 3 days
Hmm.
from now
Yeah.
and say, you have that hour in 3 days. We'll
Yeah.
talk then, Mr. Stucco. Don't bother me
Right.
for 3 days. And it actually
Exactly.
works.
Yeah.
It actually
Yeah,
helps.
because you're thinking, well, I'll get to that, you know, I'll get to
Exactly.
that old pattern I have. Yeah.
It
I think that
silences that voice a little bit.
yes, yeah, exactly. And I think that, to me, and turn back to that sort of question of humanity, and just for me, you know, raising the awareness of that we're spiritual, energetic beings, but that also to really look at our relationship to fear, and, you know, how do we relate to it, and
Mm.
what are we, you know, fear and anxiety, like what are we pushing away, what are we resisting?
Hmm.
And that, to me, when we can really come into acceptance, that is a tipping point for growth and change. So most of the time in our life, when we hit struggle, we're probably in judgment or resistance, those two
Yeah.
things.
And we can stay
So
there for a long time.
we can stay there for a long time, but if we can see it and go, huh, like if we're just like those two things, okay, what am I judging or what am I resisting? And then decide or make a choice to open to or soften to whatever that is, and let that resistance go. It's like whatever resists persists, right?
Right.
Whatever we resist persists, which is very true, which I see with clients every single day. And so when I'm working with people, that's the first place I look. When they bring something to me, I look at how much resistance they have to that
Hmm.
thing. And that's where I go first, to release the resistance so that we can be with whatever is happening in acceptance.
And you mentioned earlier the concept of space. And I just want to dig a little bit further into that because there's, you can make space in time, no pun intended. But that means having more time between some information you receive and how you're going to respond to it, and making extending that space in time, to get more choice, to get an opportunity to make a decision with different information rather than reacting and being hijacked. And there's also the aspect in the body of making space. When I was training in shiatsu, we also talked about if you want to release energy, you need to make space first so that then the body can fill up that space with something else. And emotionally, it's the same thing. You make space for releasing a negative emotion so that you make space for something else to replace it.
Yes.
That concept of space can be taken in various ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And it reminds me of just letting go. Like to create space, we need to let go. And
Exactly.
so I'll often ask, what do you need to let go of to get where you want to be and explore issues that way. I find helpful.
So basically, your message to humanity has something to do with zooming out, making space, and letting go at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And really looking at our relationship to fear and becoming more okay with it, like, and being with it. Because if we're in fear, you cannot hold empathy and compassion. It's just, it could be there, but it's not accessible. So those two things, in the current state that we're in, we've got to lessen fear so that compassion and empathy can rise.
So cool. All right. So we are reaching the end of our podcast today. Whitney, is there anything else you would like to add? I will put your website again so people can sign up with you.
I think the other reminder that keeps me, grounded and keeps me having a perspective that is helpful is that we came here to experience joy. And where's the joy? Where's the lightening up? A lot of times we everything becomes so serious, so heavy. And there's real beauty and healing that can occur when we really find, can I lighten up about this? Like you said a little bit ago, like, is this really going to matter in 50 years? So the places where we think are so important, and to really question that and say, can I lighten up a little bit? Can I hold this differently? And how can I experience more joy?
Yeah. It reminds me when you talked about making decisions. We make decisions all day long. And maybe when we feel miserable, we still do have an opportunity to make a little bit of space and make a decision to be joyful in that moment, regardless of what's happening in our life. But just in that particular moment, right here, right now, just let go and feel that joy. And it can absolutely change your life.
Yeah, yeah.
Super cool.
Agreed.
Thank you so much, Whitney. I am
Thank
so
you.
grateful to have you today in the podcast, and I hope people will check out your website and potentially sign up, particularly for your workshop at the end of October. You said, right?
Yes, wonderful.
Super cool. All right. See you
All
later.
right. Be well.
Bye.
Bye bye.